And let's continue with The Grey Fox from The Gold Harp from the Grey King by Susan Cooper. Will has gone with John Rowland to bring some sheep back to Clued Farm. One of the sheep got injured by something. They're hoping not a dog, but they can't think of anything else that could have hurt the sheep. They left the sheep in a hut and went back to check on it after they delivered the herd, and it was gone, and there were no signs of how it could have left. And we'll pick up from there. Penn paused, cast up and down the stream unsuccessfully, then came to John Rowlands, whining. "He's lost it," the shepherd said. "Whatever it was, could have been no more than a rabbit, of course, though not too many rabbits I have ever heard of would have the sense to hide their trail in running water." Will said, But what happened to the sheep? It was hurt. It couldn't have walked away." "Particularly through a closed door," Roland said dryly. "That's right, of course. Do you think whatever animal attacked it could have been clever enough to come back and drag it away?" "Clever enough, perhaps," Roland said, staring back at the cottage, "but not strong enough. A yearling will weigh about 100 pounds. I near broke my back carrying her a little way. You'd need a mighty big dog to drag that weight." Will heard himself say, "2 dogs?" John Rowlands looked at him with narrowed eyes. "You have some unexpected ideas, Will, for one not brought up on a farm. Yes, 2 dogs together could drag a sheep, but how would they do it without leaving a great flat trail? And anyway, how could 2 or 20 dogs open that door?" "Goodness knows," Will said. "Well, perhaps it wasn't any animal. Perhaps someone drove by and heard the sheep bleating and got it out of the cottage and took it away. I mean, they couldn't know we were coming back." "Aye," John Rowlands said. He did not sound convinced. "Well, if any did that, we shall find the sheep at home when we get there, for it has the Pentrith mark on its ear, and any local man would know that we went to Williams Pentrith's ewes. Come now." He whistled to Penn. They were silent on the drive home, each lost deep in concern and baffled conjecture. John Rowlands, Will knew, was worrying over the need to find the sheep quickly, to doctor its wound. He, Will, had his own worries, although he had not mentioned it to Rowlands, and hardly dared even to think what it might mean. He knew that in the moment when the wounded sheep had staggered and fallen beside the flock, he had seen something more than the formless twitch of motion in the bracken where the attacker fled. He had seen the flash of a silvery body and the muzzle of what had looked very much like a white dog. Music was flowing out of the farmhouse in a golden stream, as if the sun were inside the window, shining out. Will paused, astonished, and stood listening. Somebody was playing a harp, long, rippling arpeggios, soaring out like bird-song. Then, without a break, the music changed to something like a Bach sonata, notes and patterns as precise as snowflakes. John Rowlands looked down at him with a smile for a moment, then pushed open the door and went in. A side door was open into a little parlor that Will had never noticed before. It looked like a creaky neat best room, tucked away from the big kitchen living room, where all the real life of the house went on. The music was coming from this parlor. Roland stuck his head round the door, and so did Will. Sitting there, running his hands over the strings of a harp twice his own height, was Bran. He stopped, stilling the strings with his palms. "Hello, then." "Much better," said John Rowlands. "Very much better, that, today." "Good," Bran said. Will said, "I didn't know you could play the harp." "Ah," said Bran solemnly. "Lots of things the English don't know. Mr. Rowlands teaches me. He taught your auntie, too. This is hers I'm at." He ran one finger along the lilting strings. Freezing in the winter in this room always, but it keeps better in tune than in the warm. Ah, Will Stanton, you don't know what a distinguished place you are in. This is the only farm in Wales where there are 2 harps. Mr. Rowlands has one in his house, too, you see." He nodded through the window at the trio of farm cottages across the yard. "I practice there mostly, but Mrs. Rowlands is busy cleaning today." "Where is David Evans?" said John Rowlands. "In the yard with Reese. Cowshed, I think." "Dark?" He went out, preoccupied. "I thought you'd be at school," Will said. "Half holiday, I forget why." Bran wore the protective, smoky glasses. Even indoors, they made him look eccentric and unreal, the inscrutable dark circles taking all expression out of his pale face. He was wearing dark trousers, too, and a dark sweater, making his white hair still more striking and unnatural. Will thought suddenly, he must do it on purpose. He likes being different. "An awful thing happened," he said, and he told Bran about the sheep, but again he left out the quick glimpse of the attacker that had made him think it was a white dog. "Are you sure the sheep was alive when John left it?" Bran said. "Oh yes, I think so. There's always the chance someone just stopped and took it away. I expect John's checking." "What a weird business," Bran said. He stood up, stretching. "I've had enough of practicing. Want to come out? I'll go and tell Aunt Jen." On the way out, Bran picked up his flat leather school bag from a chair beside the door. "I must drop this off at home and put the kettle on for Da. He comes in for a cup around about now, if he's working nearby." Will said curiously, "Does your mother work too?" "Oh, she's dead. Died when I was a baby. I don't remember her at all." Bran gave him a strange sideways look. "Nobody's told you about me, then?" "My dad and I. We're a bachelor household. Mrs. Evans is very nice always. We eat supper at the farm weekends. Of course, you haven't been here at a weekend yet." "I feel as if I've been here weeks," Will said, putting his face up to the sun. Something in the way Bran spoke was making him oddly uneasy, and he did not want to think about it too closely. He pushed it to the back of his mind to join that image of the flicker of white muzzle through the branches. "Where's Cavill?" he said. "Oh, he will be out with Da, thinking I am still at school." Bran laughed. "The time we had when Cavill was young, trying to persuade him that school is for boys, but not puppies. When I went to primary school in the village, he used to sit at the gate all day just waiting." "Where do you go now?" "Tywin Grammar, on a bus." They scuffed their feet through the dust of the path down to the cottages, a path made by wheels, 2 ruts with hummocky grass growing between. There were 3 cottages, but only 2 were occupied now that he was closer. Will could see that the 3rd had been converted into a garage. He looked beyond, up the valley, where the mountains rose, blue, hazed, and beautiful, into the clear sky, and he shivered. Though the mystery of the wounded sheep had taken up the front of his mind for a while, the deeper uneasiness was swelling back again now. All around, throughout the countryside, he could feel the malevolence of the dark growing, pushing at him. He could not focus upon him, follow him like the gaze of a great fierce eye. An old one had the power to conceal himself so that his presence could not at once be sensed so precisely, but clearly the Grey King knew that he was bound to come soon from somewhere. They had their prophecies, as did the light. The barriers had gone up and were growing stronger. Every day, Will felt suddenly how strange it was for him to be the invader, for the light to be advancing against the dark. Always before, through all the centuries, it had been the other way around, with the powers of the dark sweeping in fearsome, recurrent attack over the land of men protected in gentleness by the light. Always the light had been the defenders of men, champions of all that the dark came to overrun. Now an old one must deliberately reverse the long habit of mind. Now he must find the thrust of attack, instead of resolute, sturdy defiance, which for so long had kept the dark at bay. But of course, he thought, this attack itself is a small part of a defense, to build resistance for that other last and most dreadful time when the dark will come rising again. It is a quest to awaken the last allies of the light, and there is very little time. Bran said suddenly, uncannily echoing the last thread of his thoughts, "Halloween tonight?" "Yes," Will said. And there we will pause.